was telling, by the way, on the question of Michael Bird's talk, last week we had a talk on the meltdown and destruction of real estate markets. I believe, looking at the slides, that Gene's going to talk about the meltdown and destruction of the federal budget. Michael Bird, I've seen him speak. He will be talking about the meltdown and destruction of state and local budgets. And he is an interesting fellow. Excuse me, I have a cough drop and I forgot to take it out. Anyway, I'm going to read this a little bit. Gene was telling me a little bit about his background, and I'm going to just read a little bit of it off of here. Eugene was Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Treasury for Tax Analysis and was an instrumental fellow in the 1986 reforms. He is currently at the Urban Institute, had been there before, was at the Peterson Foundation, and was Vice President there. Let's see, what other goodies? He has an old NEC connection that he headed the Educational Foundation quite some time ago. Gene, what else should I tell him about you? What else do they need to know?
A lot of old friends here.
A lot of old friends. Anyway, we're delighted to have an old friend in Gene come here, and thank you for coming.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you for that kind introduction. I should have said old friends. I should have said young but older friends. Probably the way to put it. So I'm going to talk about a budget for a declining nation, but I'm going to try to do a couple things in this talk that I don't do for all audiences, because this is a fairly sophisticated group, and you know, for the most part, economies, if not economies, at least social science, language. And I want to be able, by the end of my talk, to convince you that sometimes when we talk about budgets or deficits, that we don't always mean the same thing. And there are several aspects, I think, of the current crisis that are really unique.
I'm sorry, do you want to use the mic?
Let's see. Is it not recording?
It's up to you. And it's one you have to kind of talk closer to.
Okay. So there are several aspects of this budget crisis that are somewhat unique historically, and I'm going to try to convince you of that. And I always try to be a little careful, because we're always claiming the latest crisis is the worst, since Methuselah or something. But I mean, relative to crises we've had in the past, it's not a world war. It's not a huge number of hurricanes hitting the United States. In fact, what's actually somewhat interesting in terms of the long-term budget issues is they're basically due to good things happening to us, which really makes our budget sort of an upside-down budget. You always have to be careful about language and how you use it. I'm reminded of a few notices in some church bulletins. One of them said, please put your contribution in the envelope along with the deceased person you'd like to have remembered. Another one said, come and watch our youth present Hamlet in the basement. Come early and watch this tragedy unfold. So the way you use language can make a difference. And I sometimes recount, even this in the testimony, a dream I had. This dream, I'm sitting in the Ways and Means Committee room, and in the audience like you, and someone comes in from the National Institutes of Health and shouts, "Eureka, we found this cure, though expensive, for cancer." And the people in the audience they're happy, they're thinking all these great things, they're probably going to live longer, and their children are going to do better, and just a lot of good things. And then I look behind the dais, and they're the members of Congress. They're sweating, and they're wiping their brows, and they're in this great pain. I went, well, what's wrong? And then I realized they're really upset because now the Medicare trust funds are going to go more belly up, and Social Security is going to have people are going to live longer lives. What are we going to do? I mean, in many ways, what's really strange about the long-term crisis, not the budget issues that arise from the recession, but the long-term issues are almost all due to good things happening to us, and in the way we've set up our budget and our policies to take these good things and allow them to tie straitjackets around us. And so it's really a strange upside-down budget. And it's actually that perspective that makes me more optimistic that we actually do, and we can talk about this later, especially when we get to the questions and answers, we really do know what to do in some ways. as opposed to those people say, gee, there's nothing we can do for, we got to wait 15 years to get more information about how to control health costs, and we can't increase retirement age for anybody under over 45 because we've made promises. So at least for the next 40 years we can't. I mean, the notion that we can't do things about good things happening to us, but that have cost implications, I find somewhat silly. So here's the outline of my talk, and there are a number of slides, so I try to go through them fairly quickly because I really would enjoy the interaction with you. I'll talk a little bit about the current fiscal mess. Basic theme there is that, interesting enough, this is another historical perspective. It's probably the first time in the nation's history where sort of this long-term fiscal crisis, we used to think of long-term, maybe starting with the baby boomers
Can
retiring.
you move to that side?
Am I blocking this?
No, yeah. Can you move to that side or
I
not?
think he's got a.
Oh,
I don't know how
You can stand there.
I've got to press. I am I blocking this? I'm not agreeing. I have a problem this way. Is that better?
That's good.
I will move that
My
chair
microphone
over.
will.
To move that chair over.
I'll move this over.
There we go. That's much better. That's great.
How's that? Is that better? All right. Thank you. So basically, what I started to say about the current fiscal message, it's unique in the sense that the long-term fiscal issues we've talked about, the rising health costs, the retirement of baby boomers, have actually merged now with the short-term issues, which is how do we unfold and how do we get deal with the aftermath of the recession, which makes it very interesting. I want to talk about the health and retirement squeeze and give you a little bit of background on that because this is mainly where the long-term issues reside. I want to make a case that another unique aspect of the current situation is the removal of all give or slack in the budget. This is unique in the nation's history in the sense that even if Congress went home tomorrow and never came back, we would have a huge budget crisis. That was never true in the past, and I'll try to explain that in a little bit, the issues. I'm going to argue this is a budget for a declining nation because I think basically the budget is largely oriented towards consumption. That largely comes because so much of the additional expenses are health and retirement expenses and encouraging people to retire earlier. They're not education and they're not investment. Not that we always do the latter well, but at least you could say they're more pro-investment than something that's clearly a consumption-oriented budget. I'm going to give you a cautionary note of optimism. I think some of the health projections might be a little high in terms of health cost growth. I mean, they're numbers. We all use the same numbers now, but it's basically one or two estimators who are throwing these numbers out. And actually, I'm very optimistic about the nation adapting to work among older workers, and I'll explain why in a minute. I'll talk about some solutions, and then I'll make a case that this is, like any crisis, this presents an opportunity. So that's a lot, but I think we can get through fairly quickly. This is a type of graph you've often seen. This is a graph that CBO, Congressional Budget Office, produces. The Government Accountability Office has produced this type of graph for ages. This is sort of the projection of where our debt goes if we stay on our current path. As I say, it's actually almost a current path that doesn't really assume much at all in the way of new enactments. Probably some decline in discretionary spending, some decline in defense spending, and then all the entitlements or mandatory spending, particularly with health and particularly health, but also retirement costs constantly going up. And then, of course, what dominates is this audience would understand what dominates the long run are the interest cost. But actually, they don't just dominate in the long run. I'm going to show you in a second. They dominate in the